Hello and welcome to the Forgeborn Finishing School. I'm Casey Kidd and I'll be analyzing Forgeborn battles to help take your game to the next level. Here we are at our first standalone video, and we are going to dig into the Palladium Pulsemage. On the surface, most people would agree that the Pulsemage is a good card, but we will cover some strategies that will turn her into a surgical tool in your hands. There are a few cards in Solforge Fusion that have abilities with significant compromises at levels 1 and 2, but that compromise or drawback is gone entirely at level 3. Taliesin is a great example that allows you and your opponent to play cards for free, but at level 3, only you get the free card. We will learn a lot more about Taliesin real soon. The Reveler allows you and your opponent to play a spell at levels 1 and 2, and then you guessed it, only you at level 3. The Pulsemage's ability is similar. At levels 1 and 2, you can cause each player to sacrifice their lowest attack creature. At level 3, it's only your opponent. Taliesin and Reveler are great cards, and I am not trying to devalue them, but of the three, only the Pulsemage's ability allows you to activate it with full knowledge of the cost. I have seen players in games activate Taliesin at the correct times only for it to backfire spectacularly, because they didn't see the enemy's ability to fire off a mini combo that required 3 cards, or even just a badly timed conflagrate that is now charged up just enough because of the last mage they played. I have mentioned a few times in previous videos that you can interject yourself into your opponent's decision cycle. Oftentimes, the most obvious things that do this are when you play that unable to ignore powerful monster. A simple card that could do this is an Arrogant Worm. Let's say you have a creature you really want to keep on the board, like a Spring Dryad. You know that your opponent has removal or maybe a bigger creature. So you play an Arrogant Worm in an unopposed lane. Your opponent now has to consider taking 11 damage or leaving the Spring Dryad on the board. This is a simple yet effective method of protecting your assets. The most important part of plays like this are changing your opponent's planned plays to set them off of potential playlines or win conditions. Understanding yours and your opponent's win conditions can really help make these decisions easier. Coming back to the subject of the Palladium Pulsemage, let's talk about its amazing ability to command your opponent's attention. The versatility of this Alolan X-Acto knife is what makes it so powerful. One of the most obvious powerful plays happens when the turn flips over to you on the forge and you've drawn the Pulsemage. The previous combat resulted in your opponent having the only creature left on the board. You can now play the Pulsemage, activate it, and take out the strong creature, and this is an okay play. It is the lowest value play for the Pulsemage as a 1-for-1 trade, but it can get rid of a creature you otherwise can't. Taking this a step forward, if you are off Forge and can play a Pulsemage in a lane to kill a creature through combat, survive, and maintain the ability to activate next turn is a very strong play. One of the last general use plays we will cover is going back to affecting your opponent's strategies directly. If you are on Forge and your opponent has no creatures on the board, playing the Pulsemage first gives the opponent a whole lot to think about. Playing the Pulsemage this way is often a ploy to pull out your opponent's creature removal before you play your very valuable card. If they don't have any creature removal, no creatures on the board, they are oftentimes forced to play a creature and give you the choice of activating the Pulsemage or waiting based on their play. Now let's jump into some battlefield analysis and walk through one game and focus on the turns in which each level of the Palladium Pulsemage was played. Turn 2 of the game, and we are still tied at 50-50. However, the opponent has a Dr. Frankenbaum, and its minions spawn on the board while being on the Forge. For his first play, he drops the Indomitable Fiend, which is a very strong on-Forge play. Seeing the board state tilt away from me, I opt to play the Protective Techno Hulk in the open lane, leaving the option to mobility left or right and block as necessary. Our opponent is hoping to drive his advantage by playing Taliesin and activating it. For my free card, I choose the Arrogant Warden, who is going to receive a 4/4 bonus to its attack and health because of my Techno Hulk. For their free play, they use Vinelash to have the Indomitable Fiend bring the Warden into trading distance with Taliesin. They might have had a better immediate gratification play, but leveling up the Vinelash is always a strong play for future rounds. On to the last play of this turn, I place the Pulsemage in front of the Indomitable Fiend. In a perfect world, the Pulsemage would kill the Indomitable Fiend in combat, but my opponent being on Forge means it will reanimate. Most importantly though, the Pulsemage is going to survive and be usable next round. After using the mobility to put the Techno Hulk in front of Dr. Frankenbaum, we move into combat. As the dust settles and we move into the next turn, my first play is a Suppressing Assassin, to remove the zombie minion from the board and then activate the Palladium Pulsemage to remove the Fiend. With this activation, we have pulled the board state back from entirely unbalanced in favor of my opponent to having control of the board state and moving into a potentially strong turn. Jumping forward, we can see that in Cycle 2, Turn 3, we have the opponent at 39 health and sit at 47 ourselves. It looks like we are controlling the board and easing forward. Noticing the player's purple-green deck though, it's likely they have a stronger Cycle 3-4 deck than ours, so we may need to lean aggressively to try and finish this game out. Their first play is a free Necrovive to finally clear that protective Techno Hulk off the board that has been hanging around. They then followed up with an arrogant Necromancer to upgrade a card, their Raging Skeleton. An aggressive card at level 3 with 18 attack can be a game ender in its own right. Knowing we have the Ice Crusher in hand, and want that to be a potential second play, we opt to play the Pulsemage first in front of the Necromancer, hoping it's left alone for that powerful ability to kill the Necromancer and survive combat. They respond with a Spirit Leash to lower the stats of our Lasher to ensure Frankenbomb survives and has the ability to bring a zombie onto the board. The Ice Crusher is very tempting to put 10 damage into the opponent, but I can't let this board state swing out of hand by allowing Frankenbomb and friends to proliferate. I choose to put Stone Skin on the Pulsemage and have it battle Frankenbomb. This isn't the most powerful use of Pulsemage, but it does show the potential benefits of a health-weighted stat line. After combat, I am left with the only creature on the board and winning by a 13-point deficit. Moving on to Cycle 3, Turn 2, we can see the game stands at 47-28 and the opponent is on Forge. They play a Portal Shade as a stealth creature with the ability to sacrifice itself and give its attack power to a creature of your choice. Again, we find ourselves with the Ice Crusher in hand, and we also have our level 3 Lasher. Choosing to play the Pulsemage immediately and remove the Portal Shade from play to ensure it can't activate and surprise me with some massive damage leaves open the ability to use the Lasher or the Ice Crusher as my second play. They play the Spirit Leash and remove our Windspark Elemental to try and push some damage through. Playing our Lasher here would allow me to remove their Dr. Frankenbomb stolen Lasher and move into the next round, but having the power of the Pulsemage and knowing we need to seal this game out before their powerful Uteran and Necrium creatures pull them back in, I opt for the Ice Crusher and push 10 damage directly into the opponent. That's going to seal up our first standalone video discussing the powerful Palladium Pulsemage. As I said before, the Pulsemage is generally considered a strong card by most players, but I hope you've learned some specific ways you can use the Pulsemage on the battlefield. It has a lot of tricks, but sometimes its best use is to upset your opponent's decisions and threaten them with the Pulsemage's Activate ability. As always, feel free to leave suggestions on future video topics or any feedback you'd like in the comments below. Thanks for attending this lesson with the Forgeborn Finishing School. If you liked this video, please subscribe, comment, and consider donating to our Patreon account. I'm Casey Kidd, and I look forward to our next lesson.